welcome, and thank you so much for being here to celebrate the launch event for Miah Jeffra's just out story collection, The Violence Almanac. We're here tonight with Baruch Porras-Hernandez, Carson Ash Beker, Nancy Ah, Jennifer Lewis, Tomas Moniz, and Thea Matthews. My name's Evan Karp. I'm the events manager for Booksmith. We're an independent bookstore in a mainstay of San Francisco's Haight-Ashbury district since 1976. Without further ado, I'm very happy to be here and want to thank Miah for assembling such a wonderful cast of stars. I'm going to introduce Miah. It's going to break it down how everything's going to go from there on out. So Miah Jeffra is author of the fabulous Ekphrastic Fantastic, which came out through Sibling Rivalry in 2020, the chapbook The First Church of What's Happening through Nomadic Press in 2017, and co-editor with Arisa White and Monique Merrow of the anthology Home is Where You Queer Your Heart, which just came out from Foglifter. Awards include the New Millennium Prize, the Sidney Lanier Fiction Prize, the Atticus Reviewed Creative Nonfiction Prize, the Alice Judson Hayes Fellowship, the Lambda Literary Fellowship, and 2019 finalist for the Lambda Literary Award for Outstanding Anthology. Most recent work can be seen in Story Quarterly, the North American Review, The Pinch, the Greensboro Review, Diagram, The Boiler, Litro, Barrel House, The Forge, and Interim. Miah is a founding editor of Whiting Award-winning queer literary collaborative, Foglifter Press, for which I know there is a lot of love in this here Zoom room. Miah, congratulations on the book, and thank you again for assembling everybody, authors and friends. Thank you all for being here. I'm really excited to stop talking and turn it over to you, Miah. Congratulations.
Thanks, Evan. No, please keep talking, because that means I don't have to. Hi, everybody. First of all, I just want to thank Evan, who has been a constant support, not only for me, but for a lot of the people in this room, and certainly for the Bay Area. Really appreciate all that you've done. So much support, even when we were baby writers. And the Booksmith, of course, just for being such a wonderful repository for all of this amazing Bay Area lit. And you're going to hear some of it this evening. I also want to thank Diane and Black Lawrence Press for believing in this book and selecting it out of the slush pile, which we know is kind of a daunting task on both sides of the divide. I really appreciate all of the support I've had from you. I know you're out there in the ether somewhere, and my love is genuine. It's been a wonderful experience with you. And then to the readers, who I've had lots of wonderful experiences with, and I'm so glad that you're here to share in the celebration, because I feel like every single time we all get published or we get support in some way, it's a win for us all. And it's impossible to have a book launch and just be the only one on a screen when so many people have been a part of that. And, you know, I've specifically, just to segue into it, I specifically invited these folks because I feel like they all have either served as incredibly good friends and colleagues to me, but more so to everyone that I know that they're in contact with. I feel like these are literary citizens, and that can mean a whole lot. And we're going to talk about literary citizenship a little bit in tonight's reading, because I think it's more important to talk about that than a single author's work. And specifically, the generosity of the people that are on the screen with me tonight in various ways, either in their support for other writers, their support for the Bay Area literary community at large, even though Thea has left us momentarily, and certainly the generosity of spirit to not become cynical, to stay crystalline in a very competitive industry that sometimes can leave you feeling really weathered, because even when you do publish, you just don't see a lot of money. And we have to hustle. And all these kids hustle as well. They have jobs, they have children, they have lives beyond. They're trying to write. And then at the same time, they're also serving other writers all the time as well, and serving their communities to uplift voices in all kinds of ways. And I just want to celebrate that. And if I ever have a platform, that's what we're gonna Oh, I almost cussed. That's what we're going to do. So thank you for that. And then, of course, for the readers, the people who are here, who are reading our work. Obviously, we wouldn't be here without you. We presume that it's those people in the ether who are listening to me chatting right now. Thank you so much for attending, and buy everyone's book who is reading tonight, because that's the only way we're going to be able to support ourselves and be able to create this fabulous work in perpetuity. Because just to let you in on the secret, everyone here is living forever. So the way we're going to do it this evening is, instead of just hearing people read work, we're going to be a little interrogative. So I've asked all of the featured writers tonight I assigned them one of the stories in the Violence Almanac. And because I love being prompted to write new work when I read, what I did was I asked them to be inspired somehow by the work, and to read something tonight that they feel like is somehow a response or is in conversation to the story itself or an element of the story. Then they will read however long of an excerpt from the story from the Violence Almanac. Might be a sentence, might be a word, might be a hiccup, might be a page. And then for them to read the response that they wrote. And I just think that's much more interesting than just reading all the stories in the book, which you're going to read, audience, because you're going to buy it. So why hear it and read it? Let it be a surprise to you, just like that first date, which we all love. No, we don't. So that's the way it's going to go. And then afterwards, we're just going to have a conversation, maybe about some of the themes from the book. But really, I'm interested in how the other writers are approaching the themes that are being inspired by the book. And maybe we'll get into some literary citizenship talk as well. So it's just going to kind of go with the flow and just enjoy listening to brilliant folks, which is why I invited these people and why I'm not reading. So really quickly, I wanted to introduce each of the writers. Evan will be putting their bios in the chat, but I'm going to introduce them as I know them. So we'll just go in order of who is reading tonight. Start with Tomas Moniz, who is my neighbor. But I met Tomas years before he was my neighbor. He is a super generous, rad dad who is a delight to hear read, but is also an incredibly honest writer. And he has zines and books, most recently, Big Familia, which most of you should have read by now. It's a great novel, and if you love Berkeley, you'll especially love it. Thanks for being here, Tomas. We have Carson Beker. Show your face, Carson. Oh, there it is. Who is also my neighbor. Again, knew them before they were my neighbor, but they kind of always have been my neighbor in many different ways. Carson and I were in a writing group together, and we fell in love with each other, even though Cadet would be very upset if I said that too overtly. And we go for walks, we have snacks. I find them to be an incredibly innovative and brilliant writer, and they are always there to support other writers. A class act. Baruch, which is the proper pronunciation, Bay Area, even though I know a lot of people say Baruch and he never corrects them. Who always has a fabulous backdrop, but always has a fabulous front drop as well. And I've known this kid since we were Lambda Fellows back in 2014. Then we found out we both lived in the Bay Area. And since then, we have been inseparable because he is also my neighbor in my San Francisco flat, which, by the way, sorry, Carson and Tomas, I just moved back to. Yeah, but we'll still see each other. Baruch and I have gone on many adventures. He has drawn a little figure of me, if you know anything about his cartoon figures. I felt honored to be the first sidekick to Baruch, and now I'm waiting for a donut to be named after me as well. Brilliant writer. We're also press mates. We'll see each other soon for game night. Thea. I was overwhelmed by Thea the first time I met her because her reading was so powerful, and I felt like the wind was blowing in the hair that I haven't had in 15 years. She is incredibly dedicated to the work that she does, and that is in the community and on the page. And what I love about her work is that it is crystal clear, her intentions for the world, the way that they translate on the page. It is clear, it is honest, and you need to be in a quiet space to read it. I recommend Unearth the Flowers, which was published just recently by Red Light Lit Press, which is a great segue into Jennifer. Jennifer and I went to school together. We met on the very first day that I did my graduate work at San Francisco State. And we have worked together the whole time. We have so many chats about life, about art. When she started her press, when I started mine, she's been a confidant to me. She has always given me strong, honest advice. Hopefully I do the same for her. I find her to be kindred, and I'm so thankful to have her in my life, especially when I felt overwhelmed about going into this whole literary gig thing in San Francisco. We will dance soon, as soon as I come back. Nancy. Yay. Which is the word I would describe Nancy. A ball of positive, and again, notice the theme, honest energy. There is nothing fake about Nancy, and yet she exudes so much positivity and joy and generosity for the community and for everything that she does. And it's just so damn needed in a community of people that tend to kind of veer themselves into cynicism and disappointment. And that crystalline spirit is just so appreciated. I've loved working with you. We've been on panels together. We've tried to save the world through the kind of generosity that we dedicate ourselves to. And I think sometimes we forget to say thank you for your thank yous. I really appreciate you. And I appreciate all of you, which is why I'm so glad you get to share the screen with me. This is strangely the third book I've worked on to come out during the pandemic. And that could be something that I could be disparaged by. And certainly I've had moments, but I'm not drinking a whole lot of wine in disparagement tonight. I'm drinking to celebrate, because this is a way to communicate to the masses now, and that is fine, right? We have to work with what we got. And so I'm taking a little bit of a page from all of these people and summoning it into kind of a ball of joy. So let's just celebrate tonight and listen to some wonderful writers. Audience, celebrate as well, because you have the capacity right now to listen to these writers and hopefully be inspired by them. So please give them love and buy their books. All right, let's begin, shall we? Wow, I did that without a script. That's how I felt today. Mexico is summoning into me. Oh yes, hi everyone. I'm coming in from Sayulita. Let's begin with Tomas Moniz then, shall we?
I'm ready to go. Wonderful. And thank you so much for, that was pretty impressive, that conversation right there. So thank you so much to ask me to be a part of this. And I really appreciate the prompt as well, because I read your story, Gethsemane, and I chose a paragraph, and it really got me to connect some older writing to some brand new writing. So I have a short piece here. I'll read it right now. So I'll start with the excerpt. When I was a little girl, I was terrified by the stove. No cooking for me. Oh, it was one of those things, where one diddly memory, you will just ruin the whole shebang forever. I was trying to cook pancakes for my mother's birthday. I must have been 6, and silly me, I didn't know how to cook pancakes, but I was certain I could learn simply by looking at the pictures in the cookbook. As you can expect, I had flour everywhere, on the floor, all over the counter, in my hair. My father came home that morning. He worked the night shift at the trucking company and saw the mess, like the whole kitchen had been whited out. He was tired. When he grabbed my hand and stuck it to the burner, I hadn't felt anything that sharp before. I had been stung by a bee and had sprained my ankle playing freeze tag with my brothers, but nothing like this. A burn doesn't feel like what you think. It's more like a bread knife slicing your hand, and the smell, like charcoal and a hair in a curling iron, something like that. I remember the smell more than anything. To this day, I still can't abide the scent of a barbecue grill. Isn't it funny how a single memory can do that to you? And my response, it's called Fathers, or the Scent of Leather. 1, do you want to see a match burn twice? My father asked. We sat on his leather chair. We were alone, a rare occasion. Knowing my father, I was certain it was a trap, but I said okay anyway. I craved the attention. He took out his matchbook, something he always had on him. Sliding it from the pack of cools, he struck a match. It sizzled into flame. He let it burn. A match burning is a beautiful thing, like a fist unfurling, like the indentation of a body on a leather chair fading. I watched, waiting. He looked at me and then back at the burning match. I heard him inhale and blow it out. Then, without hesitating, he touched the ember, orange and glowing, to my forearm. Get it, he laughed. It burned twice. It's a trick that can only work once. I often wonder how long he waited to play it on me. I marvel at his patience, his determination every time I touch the scar. 2, it's distressing the way I fondly recall the feel of a man's hands pinching my cheeks, rough and dry, like the command demanding, look at me when I'm talking to you. To survive childhood, not listening is a skill perfected, along with appearing to listen, which is the soft underbelly of boyhood, of yes, daddy, of submission. Everything about fathers is a directive, a low voice booming from a leather throne, accompanied by the touch of a calloused hand gripping chin and the scent of tanned hide. 3, father never held me like his chair did, leathery and welcoming. When he was away, I'd sit in it, loved and hugged, hold TV remote like scepter, bless my subjects lower than me. When he was home, I'd kneel on the floor at his feet to watch. There is nothing like the sound of a body sitting in or lifting off leather, the suck and pull of dead skin on the living. This is a lesson. This is not metaphor. The way fathers raise sons, the way I never wanted to raise mine, the way I failed too often. But today, I baby-proof my living room in expectation for my grandchild to arrive, my son's child, ready to share the stories about scars, ready to sit side by side in any chair, ready to hold as much as I can in these old man arms. Thank you.
Tomas, my God, your heart, your work. Miah, my God, your heart, your work. This panel, I love you all. I'm so happy to be here. 2 of the things that Miah does so beautifully and is so good at that I want to speak to today are 1, creating a space for art in response to art in the ways that art humanizes and moves us and transports us. And 2, putting things together to make them both mirrors and portals. So when I look at this collection of Miah's, it's called the Violence Almanac, but it could just as well be called the Love Almanac, the Belonging Almanac, the Lust and Belonging and Desire and Family Almanac. And it's this quality, Maya's heart, that brings me here today, and I'm so happy to be here. The story that I'm going to read from is called Clips. I'm going to read 3 lines, a little bit out of order. 1, the clips started coming in a little over a month ago. I had been writing reviews for Cinephiliac, an online blog for film geeks. When the first arrived in my mail slot, a jump drive inside a manila envelope, no return address. In the first clip, the guys are throwing a football. The clip ends. In this clip, Sergio is lying shirtless on the Jeep's hood, his arms raised, hands behind his head. Even his feet look strong. The camera is steadily resting on Sergio, laying against the hood. He doesn't even acknowledge the camera. Does he even know it's there? Or is he not looking at it? Both possibilities make me hot. When I read this story, and I can't wait for you to read it, all of you, I think of the way that our lives have moved to footage, found footage, violent footage, the Grammys footage, Zoom calls, the intimacy of seeing one another's lives and homes, the intimacy of signified. I don't want to tell you how the story ends, but I'll tell you it's beautiful and it looks back at you. I wanted to write you a poem, Maya, a really brilliant poem. Instead, what I have is more of a pitch. And here's the pitch. I think we should all make a Blair Witch Project found footage porno. Let's make a Blair Witch Project found footage porno. Before, the first thing you need to know is that it all totally happened because they found the footage. I'm at Tracy's house. We're about to watch a movie, The Blair Witch Project, and I insist on horror movies because I know that with horror movies, they'll be holding hands, and at some point we'll pause and practice kissing, which is a useful skill to have in case somebody gets a boyfriend. It's real, I said, holding the VHS. They went into the woods and they didn't come back. We're 12 and at least one of us is gay, so we're obsessed with what really happened. So what if we didn't have gay role models? We had horror. Give me a femme covered in blood grabbing an axe and saying, it's my turn to be the monster. Give me a girl who floats 3 feet above her bed and says, I'm not going to church. Give me a film student with a camera who says, let's go to the woods and see what happens. So maybe now we don't have VHS or a couch or Tracy, but we have Zoom. Let's plan a found footage Blair Witch porno on Zoom. Let's do it again, but with love. The first clip, into the woods. In Blair Witch, 3 people go into the woods. They say the kinds of things you only hear in horror films or porn, like, are you my cameraman? And do you think anything's gonna happen to us? I know right now we don't have woods, but at least we have all kinds of scary things, better than witches, like how these were gonna be such good years, and like how far and how close we are to one another and to loss. I know we don't have the woods yet, but we can change our Zoom backgrounds. We can shake the laptops. We can look ahead and say, I wonder what's that way. The second clip out of 5, the one where they throw away the map. In Blair Witch, this is the clip where they ignore all the signs. Literally 5 townspeople say to them, if you go in the woods, you will die. And because it's a horror film, they just keep going. They wake up with witchy rock piles next to their tent and they keep going. They run out of water and they keep going. So y'all, let's leave found footage that says we never stopped. We never stopped filming. We never stopped going. We saw all the rock piles and the scary things outside and one another. And we said, that's hot. Let's keep filming. The third clip, the one where the board disappears. In this clip, one of the camera people disappears and everybody screams. Let's make a version where nobody disappears. Let's make it like that queer porn that you can barely watch anymore because when you watch it, it's like some weird afterlife with all your exes and your roommate and what's their name and oh my God, that better not be. Yeah, that one. In this clip, we won't let anything disappear. Like our going out shirts and our crowds or our gray wolves. We'll go into the forest looking for them all the way into 4, the witch's house. In this clip, they go into the witch's house, which is where all the budget went because it's in ruins, just like I am, with bloody handprints everywhere. And then the movie ends and it's almost time to kiss Tracy. In our version, let's use what we have. We can go to your house or Zach's house or the house that's just a giant spider or the house that is our mother's and runs around our chicken legs, or maybe just this room on Zoom. If you can look into one another's rooms, then we could be in the same house in the woods, which is a great place to start the litany that always gets me into trouble. Like, my, what big tears you have. My, what big arms you have. My, what a big camera you have. And the answer is always, all the better to see you with. Final, the one about what really happened. The last thing you need to remember is that it all totally happened. We know because there's found footage. Here we are at Pride. Here we are at Folsom. Here we are in a pile of bodies at the nightclub, even though you said you weren't going. It's all on tape, at least metaphorically on tape. In every next clip after this one, let's always keep the lights on and the cameras rolling. Let's promise that when we go back to the woods, we'll take pictures. Let's promise to make all the found footage and lose it, because one day when the woods are all burned down, someone who needs us is going to find it. Because when the ocean is empty and there are no more fish in the sea, not as in a dating metaphor, but really no more fish in the sea, we can show the sardines at the farm that wild salmon porn and say, this happened, it can happen again. Because if, like Miah's story, we're watching someone fight or be violent or love, then is it only possible that someone could be watching us, checking us out from the future, saying, they were so real and they chose love. In this clip, the one we lose on purpose, let's dance. Even if our technology is obsolete, let's play the mixtapes and roll the camera and burn copies and rewind. Let's make a Blair Witch found footage porno so someone beyond this can find it and believe in us. So they can rewind to that first clip before we went to the woods, when they were still woods, when we were so awkward, when our lips were getting cold in the air and you were wearing that backpack on one shoulder because it was so cute, and we threw away the map and we ignored all the signs, and every time we passed a meadow, we could still say, maybe this place is perfect for a picnic, or a sacrifice, or love. Thank you.
All right, I guess I am next. Carson, Tomas, that was wonderful. Thank you so much for having me, everyone. I'm reading a little piece of the story by the very handsome Miah Jeffra, titled Jingle Jingle Pop. Oh, and I'm going to time myself because I don't want to reset. There we go. Okay, hello, my name is Baruch. Here we go. Nowadays, the clientele's not the same. It's not so simple and easy. No Murphys, no sweet talkers. The Honda Civics come less and less. Now they got Grindr and shit. Now it's Johnny's not so much afraid of the fuzz, but plenty afraid of what they are. So it's a whole different ball game. They so fucked up they don't know they're afraid, smelling like Tecate and all kinds of desperation. Honey, we call them all Carlos. But they be pendejos, all with wives and little niños running around in the yard, fixing cars and working construction jobs, muscles and big belt buckles and cowboy hats, but really little faggots on the DL that want a big fucking Jimmy up their ass. No shit. Champagne hated Carlos. They all skip work and go to this bar called Tempo, a fucking dump of a spot in a strip mall down the street at Western next to the Korean nail shop. You should see the place. You walk in, the Hana music blaring, and all the Carlos just standing there all alone with their mustaches pounding beer after beer. They get all worked up, glaring like animales on the hunt, but none of them say or do a damn thing to each other, silent. They just keep drinking their beer until they get crazy, fucked up, and horny, and then they drive down the street to us. It's an incredible, tragic and beautiful short story. So I really hope you all buy Miah's book because it's great stuff. And this is the piece I wrote in response. It's new and rough and messy, and it's probably too long, but I'm going to cut myself off at the end of my time. Promise. Wait, you worked at the Nob Hill Theater? I was at work. And the topic of the weirdest places we've ever worked came up between my coworker Aaron and I. We were bored sitting at the front desk for hours during a hot sunny day, so no one was going to come into the clinic. The lobby was empty. Everyone was not showing up for their appointments. Why would they? It was a beautiful day in San Francisco. All the homos were all probably at Gay Beach at Dolores Park showing off their torsos, or at Marshall Beach showing off their butts. Yeah, I worked there for like years in my 20s, said Aaron. I could not work there anymore, looking down and grabbing his gut, which was not really a gut. It was a very, very small, tiny flat belly. But he was one of those devastatingly beautiful gays that always complained about his very attractive body. And I was done trying to correct him. So I said, yeah, you're getting pretty fat, bro. Did you ever go? He asked. Oh my God, Baruch, did I ever give you a lap dance? The Nob Hill Theater had closed some years ago. And no, Aaron had never given me a lap dance. I would have remembered some Bellamy-looking motherfucker like him. No, I don't get lap dances from fat people, Aaron, I said. Aaron laughed and was like, bitch! Did you go the last day before the last day before it closed forever? Things got wild. No, I don't think I did. I lied. I went the very last day. They were open. The place was crowded. There was a party going on in the main strip theater, and in the lobby there I was, standing next to two large muscled tan stripper porn stars who were posing with their gooey giant rock hard erections as a crowd of short old men in their 60s took pictures of them with their phones. I stood there not wanting to go into the theater, not wanting to go downstairs either, and just thinking about him, the boy. I say boy because I was 24 and he said he was 24. I never double checked how old he actually was. I never asked for an ID. There was so much I never knew about him, just his deep dark eyes and black shiny hair and the smell that reminded me of rivers and forests. Even though I'm not a nature gay, I don't go camping. I don't know what the hell forests actually smell like, but he smelled like what I think smells like freshness and like dirt and like beauty. He looked so small when he walked into my shitty studio, the second studio I lived in the tender knob. Wow, you have such a nice place, he said quietly with the sad smile he always had, that sad smile that sad idiot guys like me always fell for. What are you talking about? It's a shitty studio. It like leaks. There's holes on the floor. The window doesn't close all the way, but the kitchen is in a separate room at least. My last studio, my bed faced the oven. It was weird. He smiled again, but said, but you pay rent, right? I said, yeah. And he said, well, the shitty studio is all yours. Looking silly in his baggy jeans and giant sports hockey coat for some weird reason. He was wearing a hockey coat. The clothes look odd on him. I usually saw him in slim little jeans and a black t-shirt, or just a jockstrap on the Nob Hill stage, or nothing at all in the booths I rent in the back when he'd give me a private show that he eventually stopped charging me for. I had never planned to go to the Nob Hill Theater, but my best friend at the time lived across the street from it on Bush and was tired of me constantly complaining about how lonely I was. Decided to buy me a lap dance for my birthday so I would shut the fuck up. When we went in, it was rather empty, maybe an off night. He was like the only stripper I liked. The two before him were either too buff or too plastic-looking, cartoonish men who couldn't even dance, but like got erect and shoved their cocks in my face asking for a tip. I was 24, really shy back then and terrified, but my best friend had dragged me there. Can we go, please? I kept saying, until he showed up. He was in a little tuxedo at the top of his act, looked like something out of a silent film, a gay Buster Keaton with full lips and sad eyes. But he could dance. Boy, could he dance. And made awkward, funny movements as he clumsily took his tuxedo off piece by piece, kept doing backflips and cartwheels. He was a nothing, and finally he ended up in like tiny white briefs and made my best friend laugh at the time, said ridiculous. He was charming though. He was nerdy. And what I will always remember is that instead of giving me a lap dance, instead of creeping me out or shoving his cock in my face, he gently touched my hand, pulled me up on stage, and slow danced with me, slowly, making me fall in love with each scent I took from his hair. Eventually, I started going once a month, then once every 2 weeks, then once a week, to the point that he moved in and I spent nights sucking on his toes and fucking him as hard as I could. Till a year later, he just disappeared. And there, at work, now, me, fat, 40, my friend Aaron said, you dated the gay Gatsby? Yeah, the gay Gatsby. But hon, he was straight. No, he wasn't straight. We had sex like 4 times a day. He like lived with me for a while. No, honey, he was straight. He was my friend. I worked at the Nob Hill Theater with him. He had a fiance. Well, he like had gay sex with me, so I don't know what to tell you. And then my coworker Aaron pulls up his Facebook account and shows me the great Gatsby 20 years later. Still looking beautiful, but with salt and pepper hair, and his beautiful wife and 2 kids back in New Zealand where he was from. The end.
Woo! Wow. Wow. That's amazing. How do I follow that? I'm just like, the Gatsby. Miah, I love you and congratulations. I'm so happy for you and what a time to celebrate. And I know here we are. And let me make sure I'm looking at you. it was just congratulations. Thank you for all that you do, and thank you for being who you are. God, I see you close to 3,000 miles away. Excerpt from Eye Wall that's found in the latest collection. Here we go. I'm like tempted to like give backstory, but nope, I'm just gonna dive in and then I'm gonna give you my response. And yeah, Eye Wall. Woo. I don't know if many people know Eye Wall, right? There's the center, the eye of the storm, right? Which is very calm, too calm, very still, silent. The eye wall now of a hurricane, of a storm, that's where the rage is, right? That's where everything has gone completely to shit and everything is just up, right? In the air, literally. He knows what he needs to do and decides not to hesitate. Nothing can slow down a man who has gone to the familiar edge and has finally made the jump. He goes into the closet and pulls out a red checkered blanket, unfolds it and lays it on the table. He then grabs his 9mm Browning, his 12 gauge Winchester, the 9mm Uzi, carbine, and all the ammo he has for them. 3 very different guns for different kinds of war. There are many wars within one man, and it's best to prepare for them all. As he fills the blanket, the resolve he felt at the zoo is fortified. The fever has subsided, almost as if this decision is the aspiration coursing through him, that sense of relief. He knows now the fever was his resistance to his fate, not a disease. He is not a disease. The baboons are the disease, and diseases must be cured. And sometimes that requires sacrifice. He peers into his daughter's bedroom. They look up from their books. He doesn't want to prolong this because if anything, it will make him hesitate. And he can't hesitate. He has already jumped. Goodbye, I won't be back, he says. He walks into his bedroom. He has to be quick. Etna is half awake. He is not going to kiss her or say anything like a farewell because she would slow him down. He grabs his keys and is crossing to the door when Etna drowsily asks, "Where are you going?" At the threshold, James stops very briefly, but does not turn his head, does not look at his wife, and grips the keys hard, as if he were worried they would fall from his hands. Going hunting humans. My response. The husband. 5 o'clock, the husband arrives. No use to you, but earlier today I said goodbye to my daughters. Told my wife I was going out to hunt humans. I packed my ammo and guns from my closet. I know I will never step foot in my house again. I am of no use to anyone there. I offer my life to Browning, Winchester, and Uzi. I am a soldier who, off dubious luxuries, have accepted my fate. And so will all of you. You, weak thing, choking on your powerlessness, your balls and chains to the office, to blue lines of no grace, only compliance. How could you be so stupid? And when I speak the truth, I am the one who gets reprimanded, fired from another position, management threatened. I refuse to tell a lie. Now through the window, I arrive. None of you even notice me. I tap my palmed middle finger on my 9mm trigger, the width of breath and silence, now down to milliseconds. I know what I must do. I accept my fate. I declare war against the religiosity of your divine success. You constantly fail me. I cannot withstand anymore of your ignorance of what this country has come to. A bunch of plastic dolls controlled by breaking news, puppeteers, spray tan delusions, bikini selfies, hairsprayed acrobatic achievement for what? Nonsense. It's all nonsense. This country was founded by hardworking men, men who came to power, men like me. They were real, not fake like you. They dominated, unlike all of you. Followers, followers, followers. I see you eating your pathetic happy meals, wasting your life within the grease of superficial laughter, clogging your arteries with fat fused with salt and sugar. Society, you had your chance.
Wow, so powerful, Thea, as always. Wow. Whew, in a moment. Miah, so proud to be here. Look at this beautiful book. It's an honor to be here with everyone, so thank you. I'm reading from Babies, which is the first story of the collection, which is not the easiest story to read. So I'm picking a simple part that my excerpt jumps off of. The subtitle of the part I'm reading is called Signs, Signs, Everywhere There's Signs. Andrea wakes up to the sound of her husband, Rusty, clomping his feet on the floor of the room. Andy, have you seen my belt? She does not answer. Her dream still lingers, and she holds on to it, of her flying high above the ground, high above their small house, high above Houston, where she can just see the curvature of the earth, the great big ball of green and brown. Rusty sits down on the bed beside her. He asks, "How are you feeling?" She only nods slowly, the weight of her head in this waking world so heavy, made of lead, her whole body made of lead. She stares at the comforter and into the already fading impressions of her dream, of the crisp air blowing briskly around her face. Rusty pats her thigh. "I've already fed the kids. They're in the kitchen." He gets up and walks over to the dresser, jerking open drawers, shuffling their contents. "That belt's got to be around here somewhere. I just wore it yesterday. You know, the brown one, Andy." She shakes her head at the comforter. "It's got to be in this room. You didn't do anything with it, did you? You know, the brown one. Maybe you'll pick it up, not thinking or something. Does that ring a bell at all?" And now my excerpt. It tugs at my nipple. Only the first pull is uncomfortable, then it finds its rhythm. I hold the plastic horn against my breast with my forearm so I could use both hands to smush my left into the other horn. I shrink from the first suck, then feel the release of swelling under my skin. I'm holding plastic gramophones to my breasts, but no music is coming out. Only milky water drips into the bottles that are screwed to them. "Put a sock in it" originates from the gramophone. "Put a breast in it," I think, as my nipples are being suctioned down their skinny necks. I can see the pink flesh elongating, then contracting. Long plastic tubes connect the gramophone to an electric box that's covered with black nylon so it can double as a backpack. It fools no one. Sitting on my nightstand, it echoes like a steam engine from another era. It starts off like choo-choo, choo-choo. But 10 minutes in, it sounds more like fuck you, fuck you. I listen to it in unison with the sucking while I wait for the 8-ounce bottles to fill. My husband barges into the room and all I can say is, "No." "I've seen it all," he says lightly as he looks for his keys or his hat. "Ordinary things." "No, you haven't. You've only seen me with one gramophone under my shirt, not shirtless with both teats attached. Get out. I'm the one stuck here. Give me some dignity." I close my eyes. The industrial sound makes me feel like I'm in a factory. I am the factory. I start to leave my body. I'm always leaving my body. I notice that I leave, so I tell myself, "Come back. Feel animal. Feel mammal. Feel cow." In 1920, the first mechanical breast pump was modeled after the bovine milking machine, and little has changed since. Seriously, get out of here, I say. I'm not looking, he replies, moving papers around his desk. And I wonder, how do you go back to woman after cow? Why is cow so scary? Maybe it's because you realize you are something other than you think you are. What else am I that I don't already know? Found them, he says, running out of the room.
I love that so much. That was amazing. Oh my God. Wow. Is it okay? The sound okay? Maya, congratulations. And I hope to one day live up to the kindnesses that you saw, that you see in me and everything. So there are so many brilliant themes explored in Maya's incredible story, Ain't No Thing. And the particular scene that I'll be reading follows and precedes a vivid, like heated build with the protagonist's memories and regrets and losses of past relationships and things he never said. There's projection and there's consumption. There's love and promise and hunger. There's racism and self-pity and violence. Ain't No Thing reveals how in violence there is so much beneath the skin of things. So here's the excerpt. The boys on the bus inhale the chicken wings with flourish. They take a wing, shove all but a sliver of bone into their mouths and suck the meat off, lips pulled back to reveal gristle and teeth. The sound of the slurp fills the bus. Richard can see the boy across from him crane his head up and thrust the wing behind his teeth and suck. Lips smacking, a kind of sex sound, really maybe the kind he and Caroline had made when their bodies were still new. And then the chew, open-mouthed, the meat churning round his tongue. An animal sound, something wild, a bear behind a wall. After the boy has ripped the bone of flesh, ligament, cartilage, and everything, without so much as a hesitation, he drops it, not back in the bag, but in the tight space between his seat and the window. Richard is shocked, flabbergasted, appalled. The bone pitifully lolls on the floor. The ease in which the boy does this fills Richard with heat and embarrassment, not necessarily for himself, but for the bus, for the people riding, maybe the city, all of humanity. He's not sure. So here's my response. And I wrote it this morning, so it's very raw and it has no title. Okay, here you go. You don't look like your dad or your mom. Whose kid are you? Uncle laughs at his own joke. To orphan someone is cruel. At dinner, mother tells me that uncle would be the one to go into a haunted house and merrily tell the first floating white specter he meets, you don't look like the other ghosts. My eyes do not pull up at the corners like my mother's. My nose does not meet at a narrow point, but I have her forehead, wide, flat, unremarkable. I learned from my mother to say, when I'm hungry, my stomach is watering. The first time I said that to my husband, he responded, I think you should get that checked out. For 2,000 years, Japanese women of the sea were known as amas, spelled A-M-A. They wore loincloths, bare breasts, while free diving into frigid ocean depths to catch fish, abalone, sea urchins. I imagine the 1970s, the very first time an ama put on a wetsuit, tugging the thick, black, rubbery fabric over her legs, compressing her soft thighs, flattening her nipples, the constriction, the stretching. Did you know that we can see right through cuttlefish, those 8-legged camouflage sisters to the squiddy octopus? Pink coral means pink skin camouflage. Glimmering shadows in the sand means glimmering skin. Green fingers of seaweed means green fringed skin. That first night, an ama tried to sleep in her wetsuit, tossing and turning in her tight new skin. I wonder if she dreamed of the new depths she would reach, all the tentacled creatures waiting for her in the bottomless ocean canyons. At the seafood market, there is the artificial sound of fish and birds, the piped-in replication of nature, wires and speakers, sticky linoleum, mop buckets of bleach. As the fishmonger places a live octopus into a plastic bag, the cephalopod's tentacles take him in, taste and feed from his skin, honoring what it needs, even as it begins to die in the man's hands, like the prisoner who paused to tie their shoe on the way to the guillotine. Creatures of myths come out of forests and water with teeth bared, chewing fireflies until the light fills their body. How does the Amma eat her dinner? With the flat molars of a chimera? With pointy fangs of dragonfish? Or with the yellowed, bony specks that we lose as we age? My mother sets the table with octopus and cuttlefish, serves me, skips uncle. As I chew the glimmering sand and shattered sunlight, the cuttlefish's camouflage, I imagine all the light I am making. I must look like my mother now, who can speak without speaking, who does not fear her own ghost stories. Unlike uncle, only telling tales in brightly lit rooms so that he can compare your nose, your eyes, your ears. His open mouth always talking, 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 a yawning shark, drifting, unfed.
Wow, thank you, Nancy. And thank you all. A round of applause for everyone. Damn, those are amazing responses, and you might as well just buy their work because the responses are stronger. But I love that. I love that exercise of responding to each other's work, and it usually has given me the most inspiration when I write. I love it when I get a prompt like that, and especially when I know the writer and I kind of can see them in the page. There's something really exciting about that. So I don't know, for the audience, if any of you want to be inspired to do some writing, do some kind of response with someone else that you know, and work off of each other. It's really incredible. It's a conversation, and a lot of times we think that writing is this kind of isolated experience, but it's always in conversation with something, right? So yeah, thank you all. I was just gonna very briefly talk about the impetus for the Violence Almanac, and then I want to ask these folks some questions because they have a ton of wisdom amongst them. But the Violence Almanac is pretty deliberate a title. I mean, every single story is about a kind of violence. It is how violence is generated or how it's mitigated or where it really comes from. It's none of it I would claim to be knowledgeable, but it is all based on my curiosity. And I tend to write into fear. That's what I tend to do. I tend to write into fear or what I don't understand, which usually are the same thing. And the impetus for it very specifically was having a conversation with one of my friends who's probably in the audience, Dana Bean. Someone wanted to watch a horror movie, and this is a long time ago. They wanted to watch a horror movie, and I just went, no, I can't do that. I can't. And it's true, I can't. When I watch them, I start to sweat and I'm upset. I'll even start to cry. And it's like, okay, I know that this is artifice, but there's something in me that responds so kind of, I'm angry, I'm upset that I even have to sit through watching someone be chased by a chainsaw or, the deal. And I realize that I kind of get the same way when I'm watching the news. And I think a lot of us do. And so, as a writer, I then went, well, what the hell is that about? Because people would always try to rationalize with me, like, come on, Miah, it's artifice. You know that. You're an artist. And I'm like, yes, it's true. I write fiction. But I just struggled to figure that out. So I was like, okay, well, I need to write through this. And first it started as poems, which is usually the way I begin writing, but I'm a very bad poet. And then I started kind of processing it. And what I realized was happening was it was just summoning my childhood. I kept on writing about my childhood, not realizing it. And I grew up in Baltimore, and I grew up at the height of the East-West battle happening in Baltimore, the drug war. And, you know, a lot of my classmates were murdered because they were corner boys, you know, in the city. And so, you know, I graduated from a very small school, and of 33, 4 of them were already dead by the time I finished college. So there was a lot of violence happening around me, and then there was also domestic violence in my home. And even though I didn't necessarily connect, you know, these kind of magnanimous violences of you know, horror films and what was happening on the news with my life necessarily, for some reason that's what I was recalling when I would write through it. So I was like, oh, okay, I got to unpack this. And these stories came out of all of that. But it was very difficult because I tend to be a pretty joyful person, authentically joyful. I see a lot of great things, and a lot of my writing celebrates that which I'm grateful for. And it was interesting because this book was really, really hard. There's a lot of weight in this book. I had to get into the minds of people who have killed or have committed acts of violence, you know, even to a much lesser degree than murder, if you can even say that. But I started realizing that in the categories of violence, not only the obvious ones like domestic abuse and murder, but also, you know, capitalist racism and disease and the way that we treat disease. And like, I mean, I just started, wow, it was like, there's so much violence. And so as I kind of collected all of these different examples that I thought really fit under the guise of violence, I tried to make connections between them. And hopefully, if you read the book, maybe you'll see some connections that I intended, and maybe you'll see some that I didn't, which is, of course, the goal. But whew, I'm so glad I'm done with that book, because that puts you into a dark place, but a necessary one, right? We have to write into our fear. And that's kind of the question I wanted to ask everyone in the group. And maybe this would be insightful for everyone. How do we language the things that we're afraid of? And in specific, how do you all language violence? So an easy question.
You know, I think there are multiple entry points, and it's a strong, point to consider. How does one language violence? And personally, as a writer, I pull from experience, right? Like, I'm constantly interacting with the world. I'm interacting, like, everything is up for grabs in terms of being a subject, including myself, my memories, personal experience. And, you know, violence is just in many ways trauma, right? It's a degree that it's trauma, you know, they're all interlocked. And, you know, the Violence Almanac may have weight, but it's necessary, right? And languaging violence is necessary. And when I was given the challenge, the prompt to respond to Eyewall, I was so excited, and also scared. But writing into the fear, I've been getting into this poet, and I'm like, you know, it's one of those poets where, have I been alive since, now I'm just rhyming, but like, who have I been? You know, Patricia Smith, Skinhead, is a great persona poem, but the work of I and what she does with Killing Floor and tapping into cruelty, gave way for like, okay, how to write from James, right? This character who embodies a good amount, like a good degree. Well, not a lot of people, but definitely is. What am I trying to say? Part of the population, right? Of what can potentially lead to a mass killing. Gun violence is up, and what I found so haunting with Eyewall was that this person was just down and out and felt that he had, like, that he knew what needed to be done, right? Um, the story that was given to me was looking at people's quest for justice. And it's interesting of what, justice for me may not be justice for you. And I think that's like, there's an issue, why, right? Like, do we even have a collective consensus on justice? Sorry, now I'm just segueing, but justice and violence are connected. And so, like with Unearth the Flowers, a lot of that was pulled from examples and, finding a focal metaphor, an image, and then writing into that and having that then give way for story, right? For room to talk about sexual violence, reclaiming the body, healing, and then, exploring and having my work converse with it's like, she wrote that poem, The Kid. I don't know if any of you read that poem, but that is a poem to read, of like, what? Where you see, like, you don't see it coming. I won't even give it away, but it's The Kid. And so I was like, okay, can I write the husband? Mind you, it's a shitty first draft, just started. To be honest, wrote it, 48 hours ago. So I gotta have something for tonight. But yeah, I think persona in many ways is a good like avenue to take in terms of craft.
Would anyone else like to comment on that? Try to answer that question?
I feel like for me, I've writing about beard hair. Writing about violence has always been pretty difficult for me, just to get super honest with y'all here. And so I've always clung to the way people talk about it in my life and talk around it. The way they choose to not talk, like the way like a community chooses not to talk about domestic violence, and even the words and euphemisms they say, like, oh, she's been having trouble with him, or oh, we should not get involved in their problems, and the way that folks don't even want to talk about it. And then one of the short stories I've been working on is of course a character inspired by my mom, because my mom in the 80s and 90s was the one who was always like, you mean he's hitting her and we should all go kick his ass, like the people who always want to talk about it. I feel like in my writing I cling to that, because even myself, I have such a weird, not fear of it, but like, I mean, like, we all, the word trigger, like, I don't want to like re-trigger myself writing about it. And I used to, when I was a young writer in my 20s, I was like, I'm going to put every detail of the way the blood spilled or the bone cracked or the way the fist hit the I wanted like all those details, because, I was a writer in my 20s. And I feel like now, I always try to just convey like the feelings around it, I feel, than the details, just because like now in my, when I read something super violent and detailed, it's a little hard for me to even get through it sometimes. So yeah, in my writing, I'm mostly stuck to or use the way people talk about violence to navigate around it or get to the real story sometimes. And in the piece I read today, which is way too long, I'm a bad editor, y'all. I mostly write poetry. When I write short stories, they're way too long. But the character of the stripper, there was a whole section where my character, or me, a lot of my stuff is based on real life stories. Like I, at that point at 24, did not know how much sex workers get attacked. And I remember him even telling me about, or me seeing marks on his body being like, whoa, what happened here? Did things get too kinky? And he was like, no, one of my clients just started trying to punch me. And just me not understanding that and being shocked by that at 24. And hearing all the things that he did and tricks and hidden knives, like like weapons. And I just remember being so like, I'd been such a pampered baby growing up in Berkeley that I was like, what? You have to defend yourself with knives? But yeah, like that's part of the short story that I was not able to read because it's way too long.
I could add one thing if I wanted to acknowledge that the piece I read, I really appreciated like the subtle way violence was addressed in that one, particularly like familial violence and the kind of oftentimes what we don't even consider being violent, right? And you know, and I think I love that phrase, languaging violence. I hadn't considered it before, but you know, I started doing a lot of writing around parenting and these kind of the small ways I failed in my parenting or like did acts that, you know, in retrospect, thinking about it now are, I mean, they weren't physically violent, but they were like violence in the sense of like just kind of that parental way that it happens that we put on our kids. And I think that's really that's why that one passage that I read from you really struck me. And then, you know, when I'm thinking about my own relationship to my children or my relationship to my father, you know, how violence gets passed down and culturally, you know, through bodily, even through this kind of the trauma anyway. So I just really appreciated like sitting in that story and then making myself sit in my own relationship to that with my characters and also my, you know, immediate family. So thank you for that. And I appreciated the other two comments as well. So thank you.
It's interesting how difficult it is to even talk about the languaging of. It's like to language, you know, the languaging of you know, the topic, which I think is why it's so challenging. And you know, there's even a lot of critique when people write the acts of violence in work, right? There's even this kind of hesitancy among publishers, and you know, they're even to the point where it could be accused of being fetishistic, right? So there's so many different ways that languaging something like that could be achieved. You know, Baruch even said, you know, how it's like more of like the impression of the violence is the way that he approaches it, right? Whereas, you know, the subtlety or the suggestion, the use of metaphor, analogy is also, you know, one of the ways that people approach it. I remember when I read the opening to the story that Jennifer responded to, which is the only actual act of violence that I have in the entire book that I detail, and it's the opening. It's Andrea Yates, the very famous mother who drowned her 5 children. I detail in a couple pages the final murder in the bathtub. It's the only time I actually language the violence in the book. And I remember I tried to read that, and a woman started weeping during the reading and started walking out and looked at me and said, "How dare you?" and then left the coffee shop. And I remembered that moment and thought to myself, what am I doing that is crossing the line? And I really had to think about that, because obviously her emotional response was not contemplative. So it wasn't serving anything to write it in that way. So I want to, and I'll put in ellipses on that, but which I see you unmuting.
Oh no, I was just responding, and that's so tough though, because like as an artist, I want to tell you, no, you should be able to write about whatever you want. You shouldn't be influenced by an audience. But I've also had that same reaction from folks in the past, and I feel some of us as artists, or myself as an artist, like I care about the audience a lot. A lot of artists are like, fuck the audience. But I feel like I've so much of my work is influenced by the audience reaction. So when I've had an audience member get so upset that they're crying and they're angry at me, not at what I'm describing, but at me, I've also kind of been like, oh, whoa, what is that? Like, what? And it's made me not want to write more of whatever was upsetting them. I mean, unless they're a Republican, then I'm just like, leave or go jump off a bridge, which has also happened to me in my shows. But yeah, it's funny how, yeah, and sometimes when I'm in readings, I feel like, I mean, I can also watch horror films, but I feel like I can turn it off, not turn it off, but like understand that it's a piece of writing. And it's interesting to me the people that can't understand that and get very like upset. And then I can't understand it until I get upset. And then I'm like, oh, this is what it feels like. But anyway, that's so interesting that you had that experience with that woman. Yeah, it's funny.
You know, I mean, it's interesting, right? Because in many ways, that whole anecdote is like, wow, that's a strong confirmation that you're on the right track. Like that's how I would perceive it. Of like, wow, you're fulfilling your purpose. And in terms of it being insulting, there was nothing explicit, right? Like you weren't attacking her, right? There was no violence being done to her. So we can clear that, right? That's a fact. But there was an emotional response, right? And that's what art does, you know, it taps into the feelings and it encapsulates too community members, like what's being done in our communities, neighboring communities, and it's an acknowledgement, right? So much of the work that we do and what you're doing and what we're celebrating, right, is that you're breaking silence. I don't give a fuck. I think I'll never stop saying that expression. You know, breaking stigma, but breaking silence, right? Because in this country, I mean, maybe the world, right? But I'll just speak on behalf, like the US that we live in, right? We're supposed to stay quiet. Like we're supposed to be silent, right? We're not supposed to talk about this. We're not supposed to mention what takes place or how could someone, you know, kill their children or find a way to like shoot up a McDonald's, you know? And so it's vital that this is said because in many ways, all of the work that you're doing is contributing to the change that probably both of you, her and you seek, right? Like both of you wish that that never occurred. So let's segue, right? I mean, this is a great kind of like, in terms of like literary citizenship, this is an application, right? This is an action. There's a couple quotes. I'm curious to hear people's thoughts on this, right? Of like, what does it mean to be a literary citizen? Something you said earlier, Miah, was that when one writes, you know, it's often seen as like a solitary act, but in many ways, it's a conversation, right? And so, let me see. So, okay, one, Kathy Day, a literary citizen is an aspiring writer who understands that you have to contribute to, not just expect things from the publishing world, right? So there's that, what gets published, what doesn't. So I'm just so grateful to the gods that this book was picked up, right? So there's a relationship to the publishing world, but then there's also, right, this thing on being part of community, right? Where we're not speaking on behalf of everyone, right? Like, and it's something that I think maybe I'm curious to hear you, Miah, kicking us off of what was it like to write cross difference, right? Where you have such a variety of experiences and rooting your work as as a communal act. But yeah.
It's so challenging to even answer it because I feel like my answer changes all the time. And I'm sure that my writing will keep evolving as a result. But you know, we've heard quite often, stay in your lane, you know, write about your own experience. But I tend to write into my fear, you know, and of course that could be from my own experience, but it's also from what I observe. And so the combination of that, and also, you know, this kind of attempt to always be as honest with my observations as possible has led me to write across difference. And specifically with the Violence Almanac, it's kind of a portrait of California. And to be honest, I'm really tired of reading a whole bunch of, cis white men talking about California. I mean, and there's so few of them, and no offense to them, some of them are my favorite people, but they're relatively uninteresting. And I feel like there's so many dynamic, amazing stories out there that I see and I observe, that are related to my observations. So I feel like when I choose to write characters that are outside of my own experience, I do so I use ethnographic observation. It's an anthropological technique. So it's always reflexive, and I'm always thinking about how I process the information that I glean from the interviews, from the observations, and make sure that that's somehow inserted into my writing of the experience, that it's very clear that it's, me writing the processing of what is being observed, even when I'm trying to characterize that individual. I feel like that is really, really important. That is being a literary citizen, to be incredibly conscientious of when you write across difference, and that you obviously take those risks, but you're aware of your blind spots, and you better be ready for the criticism. You better be ready for the responses. And that's part of the conversation. So vulnerability, I think, would be ultimately the answer, Thea. If you're willing to do that.
Yeah, I'm curious to hear about others, in terms of, as you engage with your own work, and many of you, I think, prose, I just, stay within the realm of poetry at this point. But in terms of just, pulling from observations and this sort of ethnographic, anthropological approach that y'all take, like, how has it been, and in what ways do you mark yourself as a literary citizen, raising social issues, amplifying voices in the sense of your own and from your own experience, right? Like your own distinct angle, but then also too, like the fact that we even include other characters of different cultures, that also, like, it's a collective uplift. And so, yeah, curious to hear what others have to say.
I don't know if I have any of the right words, but I so admire Maya's bravery in going to these places, and I think the operative word is, yes, being willing to be wrong, being willing to but being vulnerable and going there. The thoughts that have, for me, that I see in Maya's work and that have influenced my work is around Donna Haraway's work around radical collaboration, so that when you know that when you take up someone's story, you're creating something with them and they're not there, and you have to be mindful of that. And also around just the idea of what Maya does so beautifully, which is, and what everybody in this room does so beautifully, the Zoom room, is creating more space in a story rather than less space. I'm thinking about the danger of one story, that TED Talk, and the idea of creating, how can this thing create more stories? Am I trying to make more space in the world? And I think that ties into a little bit to what all of you all have taught me about being a literary citizen, which is I am here because you all are here, and I am here because I've had so much love and generosity, and people have been like, come to a reading, and you go to readings enough, eventually someone's like, go read, fine. And I think creating more space is what everybody here has been doing, not just in their work, but in their interactions. And I think that integration is also key.
Beautiful. I know we're kind of, do we have any questions from the audience?
I know that time went really fast.
It really did. I'm just like, we could keep going, but I'm like, just trying to be cognizant of like, okay. And I can see, but no, okay. So shall we? Okay, no questions. Got it. All right, sweet. So, you know.
I mean, I have answers. I mean,
please.
First answer, I'm single. Second answer, yes, I'm ready for marriage. Third answer, yes, everyone should buy Maya's book. No, I'm sorry, joking. I just when I heard the word literary citizen, I was triggered because I am from Mexico and I came here when I was 9 and I wasn't allowed to be a citizen until I was 28. And so words like that, I feel sometimes for me and for a lot of immigrants, we're just like, we have to worry about being a literary citizen now. So that was like the thing going on in my head, and then, because of this wonderful country we live in and all the wonderful things that happen to it every day, I've been thinking like, am I going to have to immigrate again? Do I have to cross another border? And do I have to start from scratch again in Canada? Because it has to be Canada. If I had to start again in another country where I didn't speak the language, I would just crawl into a ditch and die. But I'm not as brave as my parents were. But the question about I like the words understands what you have to contribute to, not just expect things from the publishing world. And I love that because I feel that those are the writers I gravitate to, the ones that are more have an understanding that it's about what they have to give to the literary cloud that we're all creating with our words while we're alive right now, publishing and writing our poetry and our stuff. And I feel like I feel those writers are celebrated more. I feel the writers that I have encountered that are mostly concerned about what the literary world has to give to them or how much their words are going to be applauded once they get published don't go, I feel like, as far as the folks who are really trying to create that exchange with the audience that I feel like as writer performers we've been missing for this entire lovely pandemic. That's what it means to me, the literary citizen. And so in my mind, instead of citizenship, I use the word responsibility. Responsible writer who isn't just going to I feel like a lot. I also do stand-up comedy, and comics are writers sort of because they write their own jokes, some of them. And I feel like a lot of the comics that don't go that far literally are throwing bricks of their writing into the audience with like their eyes closed. And some of the comics are like, you better like this. But the comics that I feel really move people and make them cry, sometimes laugh, are the ones that are trying to have that conversation with an audience, create writing that makes them think, makes them more engaged. And to do that, you have to know what is out there. You can't be that writer who is going to be like, yeah, I wrote a poem called All Lives Matter. I think it's going to go well. And, that person that just doesn't know what an audience is, how they're going to react. Because and I only say that because a couple of years ago, I did hear a writer say that in the Bay Area. Luckily, I didn't know him. I had no idea where he came from, and I never saw him again. But I just was like, how are you that disconnected from the world? How are you that not, I used to say the word blind. I don't want to say that anymore. How are you that clueless as to the conversation that's out there not just in the literary world, in the Bay Area? And of course, he was, probably straight and very white, but he just lacked that responsibility. Because I think one of the people in the green room was like, I don't think people are gonna like that. And he was like, why should I care if they like it? And so that I was just like, oh, not only are you a bad writer, you're an asshole. and this person, in all of his confidence, lacked that responsibility that I feel like not a good writer, but a responsible writer thinks about when they're writing a poem or creating a scene in a story or handling someone else's violence. It's something I kind of shy away from. I mean, you all know me. I like writing about butts and sex. But it is difficult. And when I write about someone else's trauma or someone else's violence or someone else's story, one thing I tell a lot of people is, sensitivity readers aren't that expensive. And there's a lot of them out there just looking for work. And, I've paid for them myself. I just feel a lot more confident in the choices I make with my characters and my words when I ask a sensitivity writer who has that, identifies with that character or has the same race as that character. Because even though I'm Latino, I have light skin privilege. I have, I walk around the world. When people see me, they're kind of like, is he ethnic? He looks kind of white. He might be Jewish. And so when I write about other, genders, women, trans people, or Black people, or sex workers, I feel like I always try to find at least 2 or 3 sensitivity readers, or even just a friend, who's like, hey, can I take you out to dinner? Can you read a short story? Just because, there's that responsibility. And I myself, as a lazy Mexican, hate the word responsibility. I don't like responsibility. I just paid my taxes though, so that made me feel very responsible. But that's important as a writer, whether you're a poet or a prose person. The responsibility of your audience, of the people that are going to be reading your words, is very important. But also, don't let it I also have a friend who is too scared to write anything because he doesn't want to offend anyone. And I'm just like, no, you can't live your life like that. Write it down first. No one's going to see it. I've written some super offensive stuff that hopefully no one's going to see, but I had to get it out of me. And you have to kind of pull it apart sometimes to see if there's something you can share with the world. But yeah. And I'm also a blabbermouth, so someone else start talking.
Okay, I'm going to interrupt. Hey, thank you so much, Baruch. You brought up a lot of good points, and we could get caught up in semantics, right? Because that is a really citizen. That can be a heavily charged word, right? With a lot of negative connotations these days of citizen. And so whether it's responsibility or citizen, still though, there's this definition. And Heidi, she asked this sorry, I don't know the PGPs. Heidi asked the question, my apologies. Heidi asked the question, does a literary citizen mean just writing, reading, publishing, and supporting other writers? Anything else, right? A lot of it has already been explicated, right? Of this, how do I say, consciousness, right? Being cognizant of who the audience is, what is to be said, but walking that fine line too of should we bring up the other C word, censorship? I'm curious to hear what people, what thoughts are. Maybe starting first with Miah, but how do we just simply define literary citizen / responsibility of the artist? That's kind of what I always gravitate to. What's the responsibility of, in this case, the writer, right? Anyone can kick us off.
I have a small thing. One of my most, fulfilling writing exercises was working with my grandmother to translate a poem from Chinese to English and back again. And it was a 4-hour thing that I filmed and squished it down into a 10-minute video. But I think in response to Heidi's question about what does it mean to be a responsible literary person, I think about how it can be both very vocal and it can be very visible, but there are so many things that I think many people do that make them very connected to community, and it could be one's own family as community. And with students that I work with who've come to meetings to talk about how do they speak to their younger siblings about writing? How do they make their voices heard and known? And so I think it can be both very visible, but a lot of the things that we do are oftentimes not visible, but they are very, I think, very fulfilling and very enriching as well. And then tying it back to violence, I grew up hearing all of the stories from the Cultural Revolution. I learned about guns to the head as a child. I learned about rubbing fish on the body to prevent, well, this is for the Japanese invasion of China, to prevent sexual assault of children. And so I grew up with this. And the way my grandmother would tell these stories is she'd be like, guess what? And she'll tell about the train that was bombed on her train, you know, and she lost everything. And so it's interesting how I think violence is brought into our lives through story as well, through heritage and through like experiences and things like that. And I think that's, for me as a writer, has helped me to explore some of that in my own writing. Is I see her face, I see my grandmother's face, and she's just like, guess what? And she'll tell me the worst thing ever. And I'm like, okay, all right, it's okay to talk about this. So yeah, yeah. I was there with the nipple. Oh my God. Anywho, but that's I think that's the things that I want to say. But I love everything that everyone is saying, and also in sciences, it's also being moved away from citizen science to community science. So community could be another word as well that people use. I love everyone here. Okay, mute.
Yes, community, right? Okay, so one last question. And I'm sorry, that's kind of my response too, right? Of like, I need brief moments of comic relief as I swim in deep waters, right? Yeah. But thank you. Good to hear you, Nancy. And then, okay, so last but not least, Miah, and this is a question proposed by Katie Jeffra. Does Miah have any information to share about his tour? Well, I'll just speak to you. Miah, information on your tour for this book, when and where, what's next?
Sure. Pandemic permitting. So I'm joining forces with Foglifter, which is the literary collaborative that I co-founded a few years ago with Chad Cook and a bunch of other really wonderful writers and artists. And it's going gangbusters, but we've had a lot of growth as of late. But the literary anthology that I co-edited with Arisa White, fabulous poet, and Monique Mara-Williams, fabulous writer. We put together this anthology, and it's about home. It's called Home is Where You Queer Your Heart. So we're joining forces with that anthology because it just came out. And we're going to do a road trip around the country beginning at the end of July until the beginning of September. And we're going to communities where contributors live, largely in the South and the Midwest, but also a little bit in the Northeast. And we're inviting the contributors who we've published to also invite people in their local community to be part of a reading. And so this will be to celebrate Home is Where You Queer Your Heart, but I'll also be reading at those to promote my book and hopefully just forge these little mini communities that the contributors have invited into the fold. So expanding the Foglifter fam and doing it in probably a real shitty looking Honda or some other, cheap car that I can rent. But we'll be going, Thea will be going to New York and visiting you. But we're also going to Spartanburg, South Carolina, and Little Rock, Arkansas, and Iowa and Minnesota, and to make sure that we're realizing that our communities are not just in New York, San Francisco, Los Angeles, but we are homesteading all over, and we have dynamic and vibrant culture all over, and we are definitely worth being visible all over. So it's gonna be fun. More soon with that.
That's so exciting. Oh my gosh. So everyone's vaccinated. Will be, hopefully. Have your cards ready. Gosh, that has so many meanings right now. All right, shall we call it?
Let's call it. Yeah.
Hi everyone. I just popping in to say thank you and congratulations again, Miah and Thea. Thanks for helping to lead the conversation. I know that some of the authors had to go take care of their families and whatnot, but I want to thank you, Carson and Nancy and Baruch also, and Thea, of course. Such a pleasure to see you all and to hear you. And I thank you, Miah, again for bringing everyone together tonight. Folks tuned in, if you don't have the Violence Almanac, get it from Booksmith. You can find all of these authors' books if you just search for them through booksmith.com. The link for Maya's book is just below the video. Thank you for joining us tonight. I hope we can meet in person soonish. But until then, to see you again here. Thank you all. Much love, and Maya, congratulations.
Thank you.
Good
Thank
night,
you, everybody.
Thanks, Maya. Congratulations. Bye, everyone. Be safe. Be well. Thank you. Thank you, Booksmith. Thank you, Evan.